Good afternoon, ladies. We're going to be painting a similar painting to this. This was my practice painting that I did just to figure out colors and, I don't know, logistics, etc. So the one that we're going to do actually includes a little house or barn or whatever you want to call that. I'm not even sure. You could do it with or without. So it's up to you if you want to do the house or if you want to leave the house out. I will have given you a line drawing at class, so you can go ahead and trace that or copy it or whatever you want to do. Keep the house in, take the house out, up to you. The colors that we're going to use today are cobalt for the sky. We're going to use sap and burnt umber for this background area. The trees, I used warm sepia. You could use sepia with a little bit of burnt umber to warm it up if you don't have warm sepia. The shadows are ultramarine blue, so that's these guys here. And then I used burnt umber for the sticks and cadmium red for the berries. So we'll go over all of this in class as well, but those are the colors that I used. So the first thing that we're going to do is trace out or draw out our background, of course. And then we're going to paint the sky. And then while the sky is still wet, we're going to bleed these browns and greens in so they sort of mute up into the sky. So it's not a harsh line. We're looking for a nice bleed. And I did do it section by section so that you can go through it methodically and not feel like you're rushing too much. So we're going to go ahead and start that way. I did use my new long round 8. I don't know if that's showing up or not. I like this brush a lot. This is one of the ones that I bought at Christmas time. And we're going to do wet on dry with a very, very watered down cobalt blue. So we don't want too much paint. We want like a nice light daytime sky. So a lot of water, a little bit of pigment. And we're going to start by going around all of these trees, section by section, and just bringing the blue all the way down to the horizon line. So there's one section up to the trees. It's a little wet, so we'll just move on to another one maybe. Plenty of water. One nice light sky. This is supposed to be sort of a sunny day. So light, bright sky. Not cloudy, not dark, not gray. Although, you know, you could change it up if you wanted to. If you're in a gray mood, you could certainly use grays in the sky. But this is what I used. So just a nice light wash of cobalt blue. So let's start with those two to begin with, those two sections. And then I have my burnt umber and my sap green ready to go. So with the burnt umber, I'm just adding sort of a line at the bottom and then pulling that up into sort of tree-like forms. So we're not looking for actual trees, we're just looking for tree-like forms. And if your paper dries before it starts to mix, you can just bring some clear water down into it just to sort of blend it a little bit. And then right on top of that, you're going to go with the sap green. So you're going to add a little bit of sap green on top of that. The green's going to start mixing with the brown. It's going to become a dirtier green color. And you're just basically going to let that sit and do its thing. I kind of came up with little points of sort, you know, so that they looked like they were treetops or maybe pine trees or something like that. So you don't want a line, you want sort of a jagged edge. And that one is done, so we're going to go ahead and move on to this area of sky, which is just sky. So this I'm just going to fill in with blue. Let's not forget this little triangle there. So this I'm just going to fill in with blue. And if it gets too dark, like, so you want your sky to match the section next to it. So if it gets too dark, you can just dab some of that paint off your brush and take it off of the paper with a thirsty brush or paper towel so that your sky sections sort of match in color. So now I'm going to go into the next section, which is again another area where I'm going to put these tree colors. So just dragging this color down. And if you go over the tree lines that you drew, not a big deal. The sepia is much darker than the blue, and it will cover anything that sort of flows over into it. So that's not a huge deal at all. I'm going to take a little bit of this up. In fact, I'm going to do the next section too because it's very, very watery. So we'll do two sections at once maybe. So this one's going down to the house. So we're going to have to go around the house a little bit. The roof is going to remain white. So we do want to be careful with painting around the roof as much as possible to keep that white because that will be snow covered. And so the white will be the snow. So just do your best to try to go around that. So I have those two sections done. I'm going to go into my burnt umber again. Add a little bit more. Ooh, that got pretty dark pretty fast. And these can bleed up a little bit taller since they're next to the house. So if you want to end up doing some bleed above the house, then your trees on this side of this tree would maybe want to be a little bit taller so that it makes sense that you have a little bit of brown coming up from behind the house. Like that. All right, so that's maybe like a taller tree. And then I'm going to go back with the sap on top of that. Drag it up if necessary. All right, and then just let that kind of do its thing also. And move on. More cobalt. You could use cerulean too if you don't have cobalt. Cerulean would be a really great substitute for the sky. Just maybe not ultramarine, because first of all, we're using ultramarine for the shadows, so that would be the same blue, which wouldn't be terrible, but it's just maybe not quite as interesting. And second of all, cerulean tends to be a much colder sky, where in my mind anyway, I'm going for more of a sunny sky, maybe after a snow, or whatever the case. So again, we're on top of the roof here, so if you want to continue this bleed, you can add a little bit, oops, that's a lot of water. Add a little bit of brown at the top here. I got some on the roof too, which is what I told you to be careful of. All right, so we can just pull that up a little bit, let it bleed a little bit. For some trees. Add a little bit of green to that. And if the trees are slightly different color from the other ones, it's okay, because we're not looking for a uniform stand of trees. We're looking for sort of like a random foresty type of look, right? All right, so we'll leave those be. This piece I drew really skinny, so that's going to be a quick little swoosh down between these trees. And I got a little bit of house to contend with here. So this is a little bit of a tight corner, but if you didn't do the house, then you won't have this much to contend with. I need a little more water in this brown. Okay. Okay, again, here's some brown bleeding up. A little dark, so I'm just sucking some of that up with my brush. This bled over, that's okay, because we're going to cover that with something darker, so it's not a big deal. Little tap of green. Now, because that's a taller area, the area next to it is going to have to match it somewhat. So this section here, and you got to be careful not to bleed across this one, because otherwise you're going to get green and brown bleeding into your sky. So this is a pretty narrow area. If you wanted to stop and give us this section a few minutes to dry before you moved on, you're certainly welcome to do that, so that you don't have any accidental bleed over into that sky with your tree color. Again, a little bit of brown. But because, like I said, this is taller, so I'm going to have to go a little taller with this brown also. Just at least on the side, so that it looks like it kind of matches what's behind that other tree. And the reason that we're doing this wet on wet, this tree part, is so that the trees blend and diffuse into the sky and look like they're in the background, and they're out of focus a little bit. So they're not the focus of the painting, right? The trees in the foreground are really more of the focus. So you want nice diffuse colors here. This green got a little out of control. Taking a little bit of that back. Because what we want is like evergreen colors. We don't want, this is obviously not the time of year where there's leaves on the trees. So the green and the brown is supposed to really mimic like evergreens mixed with maybe deciduous trees that might have some brown leaves left on them, or the sticks that are in the trees, or whatever the case. So you don't want too much green, because you want it to sort of blend and look like this brownish greenish color. Okay, we have several more sections to go. We'll do them kind of quickly. Again, trying to keep your blue similar section to section, so it looks like a cohesive sky and not like a bunch of stained glass panels that are different colors. All right, grabbing a little bit more brown. This could be a little lower. Doesn't have to be the same height as everything else. It could be sort of like bushes rather than big tall trees, right? A little bit of green. We'll leave that be. I'm going to do this last bottom section, and then I'm just going to fill in the sky. This is a teeny weeny section right here. I don't know if you can hear my son in the background. He's in his room with his door closed playing video games, and I'm in my studio with my door closed, but I don't know if you can hear him. So if you can, sorry. All right, last section. A little bit of brown bleed. Lots of water there. I'm just sucking a little bit of that up. A little bit more green. Oops, didn't pick anything up. There we go. A little bit more green. And good. So that's basically our muted background. So while that's drying, we can go ahead and put these ultramarine blue shadows in because they're nowhere near the part that's wet. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to, and this is not a super dark, super saturated blue either. Here, I have my practice paper here next to me that I can test it. So that's probably about where I would like it, right? And it's going to be sort of a brush stroke, like pulling down like that. And I'm going to work left to right so that I don't have to go back over my wet paint again. And I'm going to stay near the trunk because you're only going to get shadows where the tree actually is. So no wider than the trunk, really. And this can be, you know, uneven. Doesn't have to be straight because the snow is probably bumpy, right? So you don't really want a straight line. You want sort of a random type of a line. A little bit of bumpy, a little bit of whatever. Oops, I forgot this one. And try to pull them down on relatively the same angle if you can, because the light source is going to be coming from the same place on all of these, so that you don't want your angles to be different. You want them to be the same so that it looks like everything's coming from the same direction and not from different areas. So this one got a little dark. I'm just going to pat it up a tiny bit. We'll see what happens with this one, maybe a little bit. This is something you can definitely practice on a practice piece before you go to it if you're feeling like it's a little daunting. Because once you put ultramarine down, it's really difficult to get it back up again in its entirety. So if you want to practice it first, you can certainly do that. I'm just going to do this one too while I'm here. So I love this brush, I really do. I love that it has a super duper, that's really dark, super duper thin point, even though it's a fat brush. It's a size 8, which is a pretty fat round brush, but the point is so fine that you can do, you know, skinny details and wide brush strokes with like the same brush. So I actually really like that a lot. All right, so we're kind of aiming for similar similar color shadows here. So if some of it gets a little dark, you can suck it up a little bit. If it gets a little light, you can darken it up a little bit so that they're all in the similar shade of this ultramarine blue. This one got a little bit light, so maybe I'm gonna take a tiny bit of paint and just go over it. just to get it in the same range as the other ones. All right, so that's basically our shadows. Now some of these trees, like this one's a Y. So in my mind's eye, of course I'm not working from a picture, but in my mind's eye I'm going to say, well, this is a Y, so at some point this shadow is going to divide a little bit and give me a Y shape to sort of match this Y. So I'm just going to add a little bit more shadow right here. Ooh, that got dark, really dark. And you know what, honestly, it's not a huge deal. Nobody's going to be looking at your artwork and going, but that doesn't match that. But, you know, if you're interested in realism, if you're interested in observation, you know, if you were out looking at trees and shadows on the outside, you would see that every branch had its own shadow. So those would equate together. So you could do it, you could not do it. Either one is fine. So there's your shadows. And this is still pretty wet up here. So we can't do the trees just yet, because if we start putting the sepia, the warm sepia in on the trees, it's going to start bleeding in this background. So what I am going to do is I'm going to leave it like this. I'm going to turn the video off. I'm actually going to blow dry it, but whether you blow dry it or whether you just let it dry on its own, which would be fine too, and then we'll come back and we will move on. Oh, actually, I just realized, there's sky up here I have to finish. Let me do that too. It is a little bit like painting stained glass, because you're painting all of these negative spaces in between these branches. And so they're basically their own shapes. But that also makes it a little bit easier to manage, because you're working with smaller areas instead of a large area all at one time. So that's why I thought this would be a great painting to do, because you can do each section sort of on its own and not feel so rushed that, oh my gosh, I have to do all of these things while the paint is still wet. No, you could just do each little section. Move on when it's done. Go to the next section. Move on when that one's done. And again, if you go over the tree lines, these lines that you drew for your trees, it's no problem. The sepia is more than dark enough to cover up this light blue that you're putting on here. So they're just like guidelines. They're not absolute at all. All right, so there's the rest of my sky that I forgot to do. So at this point, I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to blow dry it, and I will come back and hopefully finish the rest of the painting up. Or at least mostly, anyway. And then we'll talk about it again on Tuesday as well. Okay. Okay, movie magic, we are back. So one thing I'm going to start with is, and it's probably a little hard to see on the video, but I had some very light blue areas just across some of these snow, just to look a little bit like shadows. So I'm going to do that first so that it has a chance to dry, so that we can go back and do these twigs. And that was just a really light smattering of cobalt blue. So I'm just going to add like pretty much just dirty water. So we're going to test that so you can barely see that. That's what we want. And it's just in a couple of areas. It doesn't really kind of matter where. Just sort of to show some shadow, to make it look dimensional. You can always add more later on too. All right, so it's just a little bit. And we'll just let that dry. So while that's drying, we're going to go to our warm sepia, or sepia warmed up with burnt umber maybe. Some sort of a warmer but darker brown. And we're just basically going to then paint in these trees. So this is what I was saying before. Any place where, your sky went over your trees, not a big deal, because we're just going to end up painting right over it anyway. And the sepia is much darker than the sky, so. And the trees do not have to be perfectly straight. They don't have to be perfectly anything. And we want them relatively dark. Certainly not black, but dark. This is going to bleed in. I can see that already. My blue snow got a little close to my tree there. All right, so just basically filling these areas in one by one. Where this is overlapping, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to paint over it. So these branches are overlapping one over the other. Trying to keep my hand out of the way. So that's the one sort of difficult thing that I've found about doing these videos, is that I'm trying to keep my hand out of the field of vision so that you can see what's happening. Where I really want to be painting like this, so I'm trying to keep out of the way. So I'm doing my best to keep my hand out of the way so you can see what's happening. Now here I ended up having to make my trunk a little wider than my drawing actually, because of what happened at the top here. I got a little wide, so we're just going to go with it. We're just going to go with the flow. Just one by one, methodically moving across the landscape, getting all these trees painted in. So I'm outlining it, and then I'm just basically filling it in. If you leave a little bit of white spot on your trunk, that's okay. And it sort of maybe mimics a little bit of snow sticking to the trunk. You know, like where it sort of blows and gets stuck on it. So if you leave some white spots, that's okay. That might even add to your composition a little bit, where it just looks like snow is sort of stuck to the tree. If you wanted to get really crazy, you could do our tree method, where you outline the sides and then you suck the paint in with a damp brush. You could do that. It would give it even more dimension than these trees have. But it's not strictly necessary for this painting, so it's up to you. This isn't as much about the trees specifically detailed as it is about the composition as a whole, with the shadows and all of the different elements that we're going to have, the little trees in the background and the twigs. It's more of a whole composition than it is specifically about the trees. So that's up to you. But you could certainly do that if you wanted to. You could be a little bit more elaborate with your trees. tree got a little crazy here, so it's gonna have to get a little wider. Notice I'm like totally not stressing if I kind of go out of the bounds or whatever. Like, this is a looser painting. It is detailed, but it's detailed in a looser way. So if you go outside of your bounds or miss a line or whatever, it's not at all a huge deal. Kind of adds a little bit to the overall composition, in my opinion, if it's not perfect. If you have like a little bit of white showing or a little bit of pencil line showing, I don't think it's gonna break anything at all. All right, a couple more. So this is where I need to learn how to speed this part of the video up so you don't have to sit there and watch me paint every single tree. But I will figure it out. I have to sit and learn about editing software. But I will get there. Oops, that got a little wide. That's right. Okay. All right, this trunk got a little out of control. And now it's a little bit back in control. All right, a couple more. Yeah, this got out of control too. All right, so where that got a little thick right there, I'm just gonna thicken this up, that's all. Like I said, just go with the flow. Life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. You mess up a line, you just make it a little wider, you make it work. All right, and then I have one more tree that's coming from the edge here. And the trees are painted in. I'm going to take a little bit of this one out because I think it's a little too dark. I lost a little bit of my house over here, but that's okay. I think that is okay. All right. So what I'm going to do from here is get the fuzz off my brush. I'm going to take the same color and I'm just going to draw some branches coming off of some of these trunks. So it doesn't look like there's just, oops, trunks. Just stumps. We don't want stumps. We want trunks. Trunks with branches. This got a little out of control too. All right. Fix that, no problem. So just a couple of little branchy lines. And this is one of the reasons why I like this brush so much, because it's like I don't even have to change brushes. Same brush, completely different action. Just some twigs, branches. They can be broken a little bit. They can be solid. They can be crunchy and crooked. They can be nice and fluid, right? So they can be sort of sticky, like that. And then pay attention to which tree is in front of which tree. So this tree on the left is in front of this second tree. So I can put branches over the second tree, and that makes sense. This tree is in front of all of these trees. So I could do a branch off of this tree and have it go over everything, and that would make sense. So you have to know where your tree lies in the grand scheme of things. Who's in front of who? This tree right here, the Y tree, is in front of all these trees in the background because they're further back. So again, I can do a branch that dissects all of them. And that would make perfect sense. These trees in the back, you know, they're behind. So their branches would appear to be behind all these trees. So anyway, as many as you want, as few or as many as you want. The next thing that we're going to do with the same color, maybe a little bit more water, a little lighter, is we can take that same color and make some branches coming out of the back. So these are your trees that are in the background that are standing in this woodsy area back here. Again, sorry, trying to keep my hand out of the picture. Random branches, twiggy stuff coming out from behind the snow, maybe from behind the tree. Not the tree, what is this? A house? It doesn't have to be a ton. Could be a few, could be a lot. They don't even have to match your color, because the color, the green color, is really more or less the evergreen trees. These branchy things that we're making are more deciduous trees, trees that have no leaves on them. So they do not have to match the height of the green at all. And you can have some twiggy stuff at the bottom that just sort of goes into nowhere. So this is just fun little drawing. You could also do this with a marker. So if you're feeling a little stressed out about these thin lines with paint, you could do them with your paint markers. That would eliminate all of that. All right, so again, as few or as many as you would like. So this part that I did in front now, the snow, is dry. So what I can do is actually the same exact thing with the same exact color in the foreground. And make these little branchy guys. But I'm going to use my burnt umber instead so that it's not quite as dark. So it's a little bit more of a twiggy type of a color versus a tree trunk, right? And we're just gonna, again, marker would be perfect for this. We can have one coming out of the snow. Some out of the foreground, like they're down below. Some maybe bent over, coming back towards the bottom a little bit. There's really no rhyme or reason to this. These are just little twiggy, branchy little whatever they are. Perfect for a marker. If you want to do the marker at the very end, you could totally do that. All right, again, as many or as few as you want. And we'll have one come in from the side over here. Ooh, that got really, really wide. All right, so how do we fix that? We'll take some clean water and we'll try to dab some of that up. Even a wet paper towel. Dab it up. So we'll have to let that dry before we go back to it. We'll try to cover that up with some twigs after it dries. So at this point, I think this is dry enough to do the house. Now, I did not do the house in the first one, so I did not even pick a color for the house for the first one. So I think I'm going to mix maybe a burnt sienna and a red to make sort of like a barn color. All right, so there's my burnt sienna. Maybe a little bit of cadmium red. I'm actually going to put a little bit of alizarin crimson in there too, so I'll have to revise my color choices with you. Oh, that's better. That's pretty. I like that. So the sun is over here. The shadows are this way. So this side of the house is going to be lighter than this side. This side will be in more shadow. And the other side will be more in the light, the sunlight. Which just basically means more saturated color on this side. And less saturated on the front side. And this is just a shape. We're just coloring a shape basically. And the roof is going to be white. We're going to leave the roof white. When it's dry enough, we're going to do a couple little blue shadows across it maybe to sort of show that there's snow there, so that there's a shadow. So we're going to let this dry. I think we can come back to this branch now and just sort of try to maybe fix that a little bit. Put something coming out of there. sucking a little bit of that up because it's a little dark. Okay, so there, kind of fixed it. Looks good. Maybe a couple of twiggies here to cover that up. Some grass maybe. Right, grass coming out of the ground. So wherever these guys are coming out of the ground now, it would probably be a great idea to go ahead and grab a tiny bit of cobalt again, like that dirty water cobalt, and just do a little shadowy area so that it looks like they're grounded. So anywhere there's something coming out of the ground, you kind of want to make a shadow so it looks like it's coming out of the ground. So let's see, what else can we do before the other side of our barn dries? We could actually do some shadows up here, but they're going to be a lot lighter than the ones on the ground. They're going to be like super duper light. Just a couple little something to show that there's snow here. Just in the interest of time, I'm sucking a little bit of this up so it dries a little quicker. It's also giving a little bit of texture, which is kind of cool. So in order to make that look even more three-dimensional, we could actually add a tiny, tiny bit of burnt umber. Tiny, tiny bit under the eaves to make it look like a shadow. So that'll make it even more dimensional. The only other thing we would have to do is finish the front of the house, which I don't know if this will be wise to do now, but we can try it. So we'll have to leave a little bit of a line between the two reds so that they don't bleed together. And I took most of the paint off of this, so it's pretty light. And we do have a little door. So I guess I'll leave that open and I'll have to come back and do that like a darker color when everything is dry. There is our little house slash barn with our trees around them. What I may end up doing at the end, some of this might be dry enough. Let's just give it a whirl. I was kind of thinking about maybe doing a little bit of acrylic to create some snow on top of the branches a little bit. I didn't try it on the other one. Let's just see how it looks. This will be an experiment. So maybe in the crook of the tree here. Maybe on the crook of this tree here. So like anywhere there's an upright, you can just dab a little bit of snow. Just as if it fell recently. Here's a big branch right here. It will also then help some of these trees look like they're closer to the front. This is totally optional. You don't have to do this. Right, so now this branch is definitely sitting on top of, in front of, pardon me, these other trees. Gives a little bit more dimension. I don't want to go too crazy with the snow. This did get a little dark though, so maybe I'll throw a little bit up there. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of think that's enough. Just enough, not too much. You can also do a little bit of snow on the trunk if you want to. So some of these trunks that didn't get some white on them or left on them, you could actually put a little bit of white on them too if you wanted to. Or you could leave them alone. I think I'm going to kind of opt for leaving them away. If I can get it off. Don't know. See, the acrylic is not completely dry, so it's a little bit easier to get off there. I can just go back in with some brown and cover that up. All right, so that's it. I'm not going to mess with it anymore. That is our snowy tree barn. The only thing I have to do is put that door in when it's dry. And I will see you guys on Tuesday. Have a good rest of your day.